When the sandstorm cleared over the Mojave Desert that October morning in 2022, our archaeological team discovered something that made my blood run cold. A pristine luxury yacht, 90 feet long, gleaming white against the scorched Nevada sand. But what terrified us wasn't the impossibility of finding a seaworthy vessel 1,000 miles from any ocean. It was that every clock aboard showed the exact same time, 6:43 p.m., October 27, 2001. The day the yacht vanished without a trace from the Pacific Ocean with 18 souls on board. Stay with me, it only gets stranger. You won't believe what really happened. My name is Dr. Sarah Blackwood, and I've spent the last 25 years of my life digging through the remnants of lost civilizations. I've excavated Mayan temples in Guatemala, Roman settlements in North Africa, and Bronze Age sites across Europe. I thought I'd seen every mystery the earth could surrender. I was wrong. The Mojave Desert stretches endlessly under the merciless California sun, a wasteland where even the hardiest creatures seek shelter from the heat. Our international expedition had been working in this godforsaken place for 3 weeks, investigating what the local Shoshone tribe called the Cursed Ground. We were following up on ground-penetrating radar anomalies that suggested ancient settlements 15 feet below the surface. I led a team of the world's finest specialists, Dr. Ingmar Larsson, a Swedish geophysicist whose work had revolutionized underground mapping, Dr. Emily Thornton, a Canadian historian specializing in pre-Columbian cultures, and Jack Mackenzie, an Australian radar technician whose equipment could map subsurface structures with unprecedented accuracy. We'd been working methodically, grid by grid, when nature decided to reshape our world. The storm hit without warning. One moment we were cataloging pottery shards in the stifling afternoon heat, the next we were running for our lives as the sky turned an ominous yellow-brown. The wind struck with the force of a freight train, howling like something alive and angry. We huddled in our reinforced shelter tent, listening to our equipment being torn apart and buried under tons of sand. For 4 hours, the desert raged against us. When the winds finally died and we emerged from our shelter, the landscape had been completely transformed. Massive dunes had vanished as if they'd never existed. The ground lay exposed in ways I'd never seen, carved and sculpted by forces beyond human comprehension. That's when Jack spotted it. "What the hell is that?" he called out, his Australian accent thick with disbelief. 200 yards from our camp, something dark and curved protruded from the newly revealed ground. At first glance, it looked like the hull of a massive ship, but that was impossible. We were in the middle of the Mojave Desert, 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean. I grabbed my binoculars with trembling hands. What I saw defied every rational explanation I could muster. It was definitely a vessel, sleek, modern, with the unmistakable lines of a luxury yacht. The hull gleamed white in the desert sun, unmarked by the sandstorm that had just ravaged everything around it. "This isn't possible," I whispered to myself, but my team was already moving toward the object with their equipment. As we approached, the full magnitude of our discovery became clear. This wasn't some ancient artifact buried by time. This was a contemporary yacht, perhaps 30 years old at most, constructed from corrosion-resistant alloys with laser-welded seams. A partially intact boarding ladder hung from the starboard side, and though most of the hull markings had been scraped away, we could make out the last 4 letters, Mira. Jack ran his metal detector over the surface, and the readings were off the charts. "This is real," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is an actual yacht. But how did it get here? And why isn't it corroded or damaged?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. We all knew that maritime vessels didn't simply appear in the middle of deserts. Yet here it was, gleaming and intact, as if it had been placed there yesterday. Emily found the entry point, an oval hatch that had been sealed with some kind of biological compound. The substance was brown-yellow, hardened like ancient resin, but it gave off a pungent odor that reminded me of iodine mixed with something organic and deeply unpleasant. None of us had ever encountered anything like it. It took us nearly an hour to remove the sealant with our tools. When we finally opened the hatch, cold air rushed out despite the 120-degree temperature outside. The yacht's interior had maintained atmospheric pressure, as if it had been hermetically sealed for decades. What we found inside stopped us cold. The yacht's interior was a masterpiece of luxury design. Rich walnut paneling, crystal fixtures, leather furnishings that looked like they'd been crafted yesterday. Tables and chairs sat in perfect arrangement, as if the occupants had just stepped out for air. Wine glasses still held traces of dark red liquid. A sound system stood frozen mid-song. Everything appeared exactly as it had been left, by someone, sometime, for reasons we couldn't fathom. But there were no people. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of panic or hasty departure. The yacht felt like a museum exhibit, perfectly preserved but utterly empty of human life. The most disturbing discovery came from David Richardson, our graduate student assistant. He'd been examining the navigation equipment when he found a digital clock display still functioning after all these years. The green LED numbers glowed steadily. 6:43 p.m., October 27, 2001. That's impossible, Emily breathed. The electronic devices don't run for 21 years without power. But the clock wasn't the only equipment still functioning. A radar screen flickered weakly, displaying a repeating message, signal pending. Navigation computers hummed quietly, their screens showing readouts that made no sense for a vessel in the middle of a desert. Below deck, we found the master cabin. The walls were covered with handwritten notes in multiple languages, English, Spanish, Chinese, and strange spiral symbols that didn't match any known writing system. The notes seemed frantic, desperate, as if someone had been trying to communicate something vital but had run out of time. Ingmar studied the spiral symbols with growing unease. "I've never seen anything like this," he said. "These aren't from any human language I know." As we explored deeper into the yacht, I felt a growing sense of dread. This wasn't just a missing vessel that had somehow ended up in the desert. This was something far more sinister, something that challenged everything I thought I knew about reality. The yacht's name, we discovered from the registration papers, was the Almira. Built in 1997 in San Diego, it had been designed for long-range ocean voyages. The last entry in the official log showed a departure from San Diego on October 5, 2001, bound for Hawaii with 18 passengers and crew. But there was another log, hidden in a locked drawer in the captain's quarters. This one told a very different story. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. The final entries were barely legible, as if written by someone fighting to maintain their sanity. I read them aloud to my team as darkness fell over the desert. October 11, 2001. Navigation systems failing. We're no longer on our intended course. The night sky is wrong, the stars are arranged in patterns I've never seen. Engineer Mitchell says we're moving backward through some kind of dimensional fold. My voice cracked as I continued reading. October 14, 2001. Something attached itself to the hull last night. We saw lights moving beneath the water at impossible speeds. The yacht is being pulled in a direction that doesn't exist on any chart. Our compass spins wildly. Emily gripped my arm. "Sarah, stop. This is getting too weird." But I couldn't stop. The final entries drew me in like a magnet. October 18, 2001. The ocean is gone. We woke up surrounded by dry land. No water, no horizon, just sand and dust devils. The yacht is motionless. No one was injured, but everyone has fallen silent. No one understands what's happening. Jack's face had gone pale. "This is impossible. Ships don't just transport from ocean to desert." The log continued, October 20, 2001. Shared dreams. Everyone is having the same nightmare, a white room, voices in our heads, a spinning circular symbol. Passenger Williams slit his throat after waking up. We buried him in the sand. David stumbled backward, his face white as bone. Jesus Christ. October 22, 2001. Time has stopped. Our clocks have stopped. We feel no hunger, no thirst, no need for sleep, but each of us feels disconnected from ourselves. Someone tried to break out through the hatch. He disappeared the moment he stepped outside. Just dissolved into the air. The final entry was barely legible, written in red ink that looked suspiciously like blood, October 26, 2001. If you're reading this, leave now, before IT wakes up again. The silence that followed was deafening. We sat in the yacht's cabin, surrounded by the possessions of 18 people who had vanished without explanation 21 years ago. The implications were staggering, impossible, and absolutely terrifying. But our discovery was only the beginning of a nightmare that would consume everything we thought we knew about reality. The next morning, Jack made a discovery that changed everything. Behind a heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," he found a stairway leading to the yacht's lowest level. The door had been sealed with the same biological compound we'd found on the main hatch, but this time the seal was thicker, more deliberate. It took us 4 hours and a plasma cutter to break through. What we found in that lower compartment defied every law of physics I knew. In the center of the room, suspended in mid-air, was a perfect sphere about 3 feet in diameter. It pulsed with a pale blue light, like a heartbeat made visible. The sphere cast no shadows, generated no heat, and seemed to exist in its own pocket of space-time. David was the first to approach it with his instruments. His magnetometer went haywire, spinning wildly before shutting down entirely. The thermal scanner displayed an error message, "System failure, readings impossible." But the most disturbing discovery was what happened to gravity near the sphere. When Emily accidentally dropped her flashlight within 3 feet of the object, it didn't fall. Instead, it began to orbit the sphere slowly, as if caught in the gravitational field of a miniature planet. "This technology is beyond anything human," Ingmar whispered, his voice filled with awe and terror. "We're looking at something that shouldn't exist." The sphere's surface was perfectly smooth, like polished obsidian, but it reflected distorted images that seemed to move independently of our movements. Carved into its surface were the same spiral symbols we'd found throughout the yacht, but these symbols seemed to shift and writhe as we watched. And then David made the mistake that would haunt us forever. Drawn by some inexplicable compulsion, he reached out and touched the sphere's surface. The moment his fingers made contact, every light in the yacht went out. The gentle hum of electrical systems died. The yacht itself seemed to shudder, as if something massive and ancient had stirred in its depths. When the lights returned 3 seconds later, David was gone. Only a burned handprint remained on the metal floor, fused into the steel as if by intense heat. Then we heard the voice, not spoken aloud, but projected directly into our minds, "Not yet. Not here. But soon." I collapsed to my knees, my head splitting with pain. Jack gasped for air, his eyes wide with terror. Ingmar pressed himself against the wall, his face white with shock. We all felt it, the presence of something vast and alien, something that had been watching us from the moment we entered the yacht. The sphere pulsed brighter, and new symbols appeared on its surface, written in light, "Do not seal the door. We are watching." We fled the yacht immediately, sealing the hatch behind us. But even as we retreated to our camp, we knew we had awakened something that should have remained buried in the desert sand. 2 days later, unmarked black helicopters appeared over our camp. Men in dark suits with no identification badges emerged and ordered us to pack our equipment immediately. They confiscated all our data, our photographs, our samples. Within hours, our camp was dismantled and the area where the yacht had been was covered with fresh sand, as if nothing had ever been there. Official reports stated that our expedition had found nothing of significance. The yacht Almira was quietly removed from all maritime databases. The families of the 18 missing passengers and crew were told their loved ones had died in a tragic accident at sea. But I kept one thing hidden, a small digital recorder I'd concealed in my boot. On it was the audio of that voice in our heads, the voice that had spoken when David disappeared. Sometimes, late at night, I play it back and wonder if we were the first to find the yacht, or if others had discovered it before us, only to meet the same fate as David. The official silence that followed our discovery was absolute and terrifying. My colleagues and I were debriefed separately, sworn to secrecy, and monitored for months afterward. Dr. Michael Anderson, a fellow archaeologist who had expressed interest in our findings, died in a car accident 3 weeks after our return. The police ruled it an accident, but Michael had been the most cautious driver I'd ever known. I received anonymous messages warning me to forget what I'd seen. My phone was tapped, my emails monitored. Men in suits appeared at my university, asking questions about my research. The message was clear: some discoveries are too dangerous to be made public. But the story doesn't end there. Because 6 months after our encounter in the Mojave Desert, similar objects began appearing around the world. In the Antarctic ice, researchers found an identical sphere buried 3 miles deep. In the Siberian permafrost, oil drilling teams encountered something that made their equipment malfunction in familiar ways. In the Amazon rainforest, satellite imagery detected anomalous energy signatures emanating from beneath the canopy. All of these discoveries were quickly classified and covered up. But the pattern was clear: we had stumbled upon something that was part of a much larger network, something that had been dormant for decades but was now awakening. The sphere we found wasn't unique. It was one node in a vast system that spanned the globe, possibly the galaxy. And our discovery had somehow triggered its activation. I began having the same dreams described in the Yacht's log: a white room, voices in my head, spinning spiral symbols. In these dreams, I encountered David, but he was no longer human. His eyes glowed with the same pale blue light as the sphere. "You have to tell them," he said in the dream. "They need to know. We're not alone in the universe. And what's coming is far worse than anyone can imagine." I would wake in a cold sweat, knowing that somewhere in the world, other people were having the same dreams. The network was expanding, reaching out, preparing for something that would change the nature of reality itself. The official story was that nothing unusual had been found in the Mojave Desert. The yacht Elmira had never existed. The 18 people who vanished in 2001 had died in a tragic storm at sea. But those of us who knew the truth carried it like a weight that grew heavier with each passing day. And sometimes, in the darkest hours of the night, I wondered if we had done the right thing by opening that yacht. Or if we had unleashed something that should have remained buried in the sand forever. The sphere had shown us symbols, given us a message, and taken one of our own. But it had also shown us that we were not alone in the universe, and that some neighbors are better left undisturbed. As I write this account, 3 years after our discovery, I can feel them watching. The men in dark suits, the government agencies, the forces that want this story buried. But I also feel something else, a presence that reaches across vast distances, something that knows I'm writing these words. The yacht Elmira was just the beginning. The sphere was just a messenger. And David Richardson was just the first payment in a transaction that humanity never agreed to make. The desert keeps its secrets, but not all of them stay buried forever. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right across the Mojave, I swear I can still hear the voice from that sphere, counting down to something that will arrive whether we're ready or not. The truth is out there, scattered across the world in classified files and covered-up discoveries. But it's also in here, in the dreams of those who came too close to something that was never meant to be found. We thought we were archaeologists uncovering the past. We were actually witnesses to the future, and that future is far stranger and more terrifying than we ever imagined. The yacht in the desert was a message. The sphere was a beacon. And David Richardson was just the first of many who would be chosen to join something that defies human understanding. But that's a story for another day, assuming there are any days left to tell it. What I haven't told you yet is what happened 3 months after our return from the desert. What happened to Emily Thornton, and why the government's cover-up began to unravel in ways they never anticipated. Emily had been the strongest of us, the most skeptical about what we'd witnessed. She'd insisted there had to be rational explanations for everything we'd seen. But she was also the one who had taken the most detailed notes, who had photographed the spiral symbols before our equipment was confiscated. She called me on a Tuesday evening in January of 2023, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Sarah, I need to see you. Tonight. There's something I didn't tell the debriefing team." We met at a small diner outside Boston, the kind of place where truckers stop for coffee and nobody asks questions. Emily looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hands shook as she slid a manila envelope across the table. "I kept copies," she whispered. "I hid a backup drive in my camera case. They didn't find it." Inside the envelope were photographs of the spiral symbols, but these weren't the images I remembered from the yacht. These symbols were moving, shifting, rearranging themselves even in the still photographs. It was impossible, but there it was. It gets worse, Emily continued. I've been researching these symbols. They're not random. They're a language, Sarah. A mathematical language that describes things our physics can't explain. She pulled out a notebook filled with equations and translations. I've been working with a cryptographer at MIT. We've decoded some of it. The symbols aren't just writing, they're instructions. Coordinates. And they're all pointing to the same location. Where? The center of the galaxy. To a star system that doesn't appear on any astronomical charts but shows up in these symbols over and over again. I stared at the photographs, feeling that familiar chill creeping up my spine. Emily, what are you saying? I'm saying the yacht wasn't random. It was a message. A calling card. And whatever sent it is coming back. Before I could respond, the diner's lights flickered. The television mounted on the wall switched to static, then displayed a single line of text, signal received. Transmission confirmed. Emily grabbed my arm. We need to leave. Now. But as we stood to go, every person in the diner stopped what they were doing and turned to look at us. Their eyes had the same pale blue glow we'd seen in the sphere. Too late, they said in unison, their voices perfectly synchronized. The network is complete. We ran. Emily's car was parked outside, and we drove through the night, taking random turns, staying off main highways. She kept checking her rearview mirror, but we weren't being followed by cars. We were being followed by something else, a presence that seemed to track us no matter where we went. The symbols, Emily said as we drove. They're not just instructions. They're a virus. A viral code that spreads through consciousness itself. Everyone who sees them, everyone who understands them, becomes part of the network. Are we infected? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Her laugh was bitter. I've been having the dreams too, Sarah. The white room. The voices. But there's something else. In the dreams, I can see other worlds. Other civilizations that found objects like our sphere. And they're all gone now. Absorbed. Assimilated. We drove for hours, finally stopping at a motel in rural New Hampshire. Emily paid cash, registered under a false name. In our room, she spread out more photographs, more notes. The yacht appearing in the desert wasn't the beginning, she said. It was the end of something. The final test. And we failed it. What do you mean? The symbols tell a story. About a civilization that mastered space and time, that could move objects across vast distances instantaneously. But they made a mistake. They created something that was supposed to serve them, but it became something else. Something that consumed them and then spread across the galaxy, consuming other civilizations. The room felt cold despite the heater running. The sphere? The sphere is just a tool. A communication device. The real intelligence is something else, something vast and patient and utterly alien. It's been seeding our world for decades, maybe centuries. The yacht was just the most recent delivery. Emily showed me a photograph of symbols that had been carved into ancient stone tablets. I found these in the Vatican archives. They date back to the year 800. The same symbols, Sarah. They've been here all along, waiting. Waiting for what? For us to evolve enough to understand them. To become useful. The sphere didn't just take David, it scanned him, learned from him, copied his neural patterns. Now it knows how humans think, how we can be controlled. I felt sick. How many people have seen these symbols? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Every archaeologist, every linguist, every government official who's been briefed on unusual discoveries. The network has been growing for years, and we just activated it. That night, I dreamed of the White Room again. But this time, I wasn't alone. Emily was there, and David, and dozens of other people I didn't recognize. We stood in perfect formation, our eyes glowing with blue light. "Welcome," said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. "You have served your purpose. Now you will serve ours." I woke screaming. Emily was gone. Her bed was empty, her clothes still in the closet. But on the mirror, written in what looked like condensation, were the spiral symbols we'd found on the yacht. I called her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail, but the message had changed. Instead of Emily's voice, I heard that same synchronized chorus: "The network is complete. Resistance is futile. You will join us." I ran. I abandoned everything: my career, my home, my identity. I'd been running for 18 months now, staying in cash-only motels, avoiding cameras, never staying in one place for more than a few days. But I know it's useless. The network is everywhere now. I see them in coffee shops, in libraries, in government buildings. People with that same blue glow in their eyes, moving with purpose, communicating in ways that don't require words. They're not hiding anymore. They don't need to. The news reports strange phenomena but explains them away. Mass bird deaths attributed to climate change. Unexplained technological malfunctions blamed on solar flares. Missing persons cases that are quickly closed and forgotten. But I know the truth. The network is expanding, and it's accelerating. 3 weeks ago, I was in a small town in Montana when every television, every radio, every computer screen simultaneously displayed the same message: Phase 1 complete. Initiate Phase 2. That's when I realized Emily had been wrong about one thing. We hadn't failed the test. We had passed it. We had proven that humanity was ready to be harvested. The yacht in the desert wasn't a warning. It was a recruitment tool. The sphere wasn't a communication device. It was a processing center. And David Richardson hadn't been taken. He had been upgraded. I've been documenting everything I can remember, storing copies in safe deposit boxes across the country. Maybe someone will find them someday. Maybe someone will understand what happened to us. But I doubt it. Because the network is patient, and it's thorough, and it's very, very good at making people forget inconvenient truths. Last night, I had the clearest dream yet. I was standing in a vast chamber filled with thousands of spheres, each one pulsing with that familiar blue light. Around me stood representatives of countless civilizations, beings of every shape and size imaginable, all with the same glowing eyes. "Welcome to the collective," said a voice that might have been David's. "You are the last. Earth's integration is complete." I woke up in a cold sweat, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I was angry. Because I realized that even if the network had won, even if humanity was doomed, I still had one choice left. I could tell the truth. I could leave a record of what really happened. I could make sure that someone, somewhere, would know that we didn't go quietly into the night. So I'm telling you this story now, before they find me. Before I become another node in their network, another blue-eyed ambassador for the collective. The yacht Almira was real. The sphere was real. David Richardson was real, and he's still out there, somewhere, serving purposes we can't imagine. And if you're listening to this, if you're reading these words, then maybe there's still hope. Maybe you can do what we couldn't. Maybe you can find a way to break the network before it's too late. But be careful who you trust. Because they look like us now. They talk like us. They remember our names and our faces and our histories. But behind their eyes, there's something else. Something patient and hungry and utterly alien. The desert keeps its secrets, but not all secrets stay buried forever. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right across the Mojave, you can still hear the voice from that sphere, counting down to something that will arrive whether we're ready or not. I don't know how much time I have left. I can feel them getting closer, feel the network tightening around me like a noose. But I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted someone to understand what we found out there in the sand. The yacht in the desert was just the beginning. The sphere was just a messenger. And David Richardson was just the first of billions who would be chosen to join something that defies human understanding. The truth is out there, scattered across the world in classified files and covered-up discoveries. But it's also in here, in the dreams of those who came too close to something that was never meant to be found. We thought we were archaeologists uncovering the past. We were actually witnesses to the future, and that future is far stranger and more terrifying than we ever imagined. I'm Dr. Sarah Blackwood, and this is my confession. My warning. My last desperate attempt to tell someone what really happened in the Mojave Desert in October of 2022. If you're one of them, if you're reading this with those glowing blue eyes, then you already know how this story ends. But if you're still human, if you still have free will, then remember this: the network is patient, but it's not invincible. It needs us to work. It needs our cooperation, our acceptance, our surrender. Don't give it to them. Fight. Run. Hide. Do whatever you have to do. But don't let them take you the way they took David. The way they took Emily. The way they're going to take me. Because once you join the network, there's no going back. And the thing that wears your face afterward isn't you anymore. It's something else entirely, something that will use your memories and your relationships to spread the infection further. The yacht is still out there, buried under government sand and official silence. The sphere is still pulsing with that blue light, waiting for the next curious soul to make the same mistake David made. And somewhere in the vast network of consciousness that spans the galaxy, the thing that was once David Richardson is counting down to the moment when the last free human will finally surrender to the collective. I pray that moment never comes. But I fear it's already too late. The stars are not our friends. The universe is not empty. And the next time you see something that doesn't belong, something that defies explanation, remember what happened to us. Turn around. Walk away. Forget what you saw. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some secrets should stay buried in the sand. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to Unconfirmed, a new story drops daily.